Hello and welcome to our class on genetics. This lesson is lesson 1.1, the introduction to genetics. My name is Lauren Davis. I'm one of the instructors in this class. As you probably know, genetics is just the scientific study of how traits are passed from one generation to another. What happens at the molecular level that allows these traits to move from one generation to the next to the next? And what kind of theories explain how that happens? We're going to talk about that in this genetics course. No discussion of genetics would be complete without mentioning the father of modern genetics. His name is Gregor Mendel, and he's the first one who used math and science techniques to explain how heredity takes place. Okay, before he was here, the blending theory was the accepted theory of genetics. The blending theory simply says that if you take two parent organisms, breed them together, get the offspring, you will have an offspring that has blended traits. For example, if you took a white rose and a red rose and cross-pollinated them, some of their offspring would be pink, a blending of the white and the red roses. Well, that is not how genetics works. Genetics actually is an either-or, and he's the one that came up with that. He's the one that first used math and science techniques and a device called a Punnett square to show how the parent organisms in a crossbreed or in a cross between the two will hand down the traits to the next generation. So Gregor Mendel is an important figure in the study of traits. So some of Mendel's discoveries are that traits are determined by this thing that he called a pair of alleles. Now, alleles are something that he explained occur within every living organism, and they occur in pairs. And so a good way to look at this is if you see the chart at the bottom. You see that this is a chart that shows pea plant blossoms. He studied pea plants because, well, he grew up on a farm, and he saw that pea plants had many different traits that could be studied, and they differentiate between parents and offsprings. And so he looked at not only the color of the blossom of a pea plant, but he looked at the peas themselves, the wrinkled skin of the peas, the color of the peas, the hairiness of a stem of a pea plant. He looked at a lot of different traits, and he crossbred thousands and thousands of these pea plants together, kept careful study and careful track of his data, and he came up with his ideas of genetics that are accepted today. So you see in this chart that there are two parent plants located at the top and at the left side of this chart. You see that one is a male, it has the pollen, and then in the pistil of the female plant, you can see off to the left. The big B and small b is the pair of alleles. Now he designated the B for the color of the pea blossom. Maybe B stands for blossom, and so he in this case the parent plant have a big B and a little b as a pair. Now he called the traits either dominant or recessive depending on how frequently the traits show up. So the dominant allele or the dominant trait is always going to be signified by the capital letter, in this case the capital B. So the parent or the male part of this cross is the top. You see, he has one allele that's a dominant allele and one allele that is a recessive allele, showing that it's big B, little b. And so does the female. The female has a big B, small b. So both of these have pink flowers because the dominant allele is showing up. Okay, so as this cross takes place, you can predict what the offspring are going to look like by using this Punnett square. So you see in the lighter colored area in this Punnett square, in the box, you see it's the upper left-hand side, you have an offspring that could have two big B's or two dominant alleles for the color of the plant. And because they have at least one, it's going to be pink. And so that would be called a purebred dominant plant. And So just below that, you see some of the offsprings will be like their parents. They have an allele pair that's a big B, small b. Okay, and so those will also show the dominant trait of pink. And so as long as it has at least one allele from either the male plant or the female plant, it's going to show the pink blossom. Now in the bottom right, you see that there's a white blossom that can occur from this cross too. But the only way that's going to happen is if it has two recessive alleles, a small b and a small b. So the Punnett square can predict that in a cross between two parent plants that have alleles that are mixed, a big B and a small b, you're going to get 75%, or 3 out of 4 of the plants are going to have pink blossoms, because there is no difference in the appearance of the plant that has a big B, small b, and a big B, big B. The only difference is if it has two small or two recessive alleles, and that will turn the plant white. So as Gregor Mendel did these experiments with these pea plants, he found this to be true all the time. He said that they'll either be pink or white, and that the pink will be 75% of the time, and the white 25% of the time, if we know that the allele pair of the parents has a big B, small b. It's a very smart, very intuitive way of studying, but it takes generations and generations of growing these plants to determine and to make these theories and these rules of genetics. So this is what he found out. And, alleles can either be dominant or recessive. We talked about that. An allele pair will determine the appearance or the trait of the organism, and we saw that in the previous slide as well. An organism can either have two dominant alleles, like we showed the big B and the big B. It can have one dominant and one recessive, or it can have two recessive. A dominant trait will be apparent if the organism has at least one dominant allele. Remember, the 3/4 of the time, that pea plant is going to have pink blossoms. The only way a recessive trait appears is if the organism has two recessive alleles, one from each parent for that trait. Okay, and so that is how the recessive trait shows up, and the recessive trait will always be hidden if there is a dominant trait that is given by one of the parents as well. So homozygote is the official name given to an organism that has two of the same alleles for that trait. Either two dominant or two recessive alleles will be homozygote for the recessive or the dominant trait. Heterozygote of an organism it has one dominant and one recessive allele for that trait. The dominant trait will always show in this case. So two more terms that you should be familiar with as we study and we talk about genetics is the term of genotype. Genotype is the genetic makeup of an organism. So, example, not only are we talking about just specific traits like the color of a pea plant, but we're talking about the whole genetic makeup. The genetic makeup of the plant, of plants and animals and other organisms are determined by the alleles, that come from the parent plants. And the phenotype is the appearance that is dependent upon the genetic makeup. So phenotype means appearance, genotype means genetic code or the genetic makeup of the organism. I threw this picture of these two dogs that look very similar, and so they have many of the same genes in common because they have a very similar look to them, although one, it seems a little hairier and is a little bit darker, so some of the genes are different. So the phenotype here we see are very similar because they share a lot of the same genes, but the genotype that determines color will make the phenotype, the appearance of the dogs, look different.